Welcome to Mad Men, a podcast dedicated to recapping and analyzing the AMC series Mad Men from the perspective of three very different types of Mad Men watchers. We have someone here who is watching the show for the first time ever right with us, and someone else who is rewatching the show for the first time since it finished airing in 2015. And then there's me, who has watched Mad Men more times than I've been to Disneyland, which really is saying a lot. I'm John Negroni, and Will Ashton, did you ever think of the number of things that had to happen for me to get to podcast with you?
What up? I am so glad that I can have this experience with you since we went to Disneyland earlier this year. It's nice.
True.
Yeah. So
we didn't have the same kind of ending, let's just say, that Don and Megan had. As I might have.
As much as I would have liked the happy ending, I don't think that's exactly what we got.
And of course, we can't forget about Mike Overholse. And Mike, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's no need to be upset. It's just milkshake.
I think the fun thing about your Disneyland trip compared to this one is theirs ended in a marriage and yours started with one. If you really think about it.
That's true. Yeah, because we did go to Mike's wedding the day before.
Yeah, so all three of us are connected in that. Yeah. So that is true.
I think it makes me Bobby.
Mike, I'm a little disappointed because the whole milkshake thing was a setup for the I drink your milkshake thing, which has always been one of your favorite bits. And I was waiting for it. I was hyped. I was texting my parents about it earlier, but that's fine, I guess.
This is a podcast about the silver screen. If you want movie impersonations, got to get me on a different one.
Well, boys, we made it. We made it to the end of season 4, one of my favorite seasons. And hey, look, in the spirit of an episode called Tomorrowland, it's all about the future. I even changed the beginning of the thing. Now, Will, you are the one who is watching this for the first time, as we are wont to always mention.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is episode 13. It came out October 17th, 2010, and it takes place in October 1965. Matthew Weiner directed the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. It actually is the first and only time he directed an episode in all of season 4, believe it or not. That is kind of unusual. And I guess, well, actually, that's not unusual because he did the same thing in season 3. He only directed the season finale of that one. And he only directed the season finale of season 2. So, yeah, actually, never mind. That's actually like what he always does.
Right.
Not unusual.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if you were teeing off, like, saying that he directs more in the later seasons, which may be true. I didn't know if that's what you were getting at, but yeah, this is the only. I think he's only directed season finale so far, right? So,
right, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, well, you'll see if that ever changes, but that actually is pretty consistent. Mm-hmm. I think I was just confusing it with how, of course, he writes and co-writes quite a lot. Now he co-writes here with Jonathan Igla, one of the show's producers. And this is Igla's first time writing or co-writing. Jonathan Igla, who are either of you aware who that is? Okay, so he's kind of a more anonymous producer and writer in this grand scheme of things. He was a writer and executive producer for Hawkeye, the Marvel Disney Plus thing. And he also has worked on shows, not just Mad Men, but also Bridgerton. So kind of, he's kind of been around. I wasn't super familiar with him, to be totally honest, until I looked him up. But he's on the commentary, and it's funny because in the DVD commentary, he really gets on with Weiner. You know how I've brought up a few times how sometimes they have people on these commentaries and they kind of don't totally they kind of don't know when to talk. And Weiner is just sort of talking the whole time. And sometimes he throws them a bone. It's just like, what did you think of that? And they're like, well, And this guy, he and Weiner were kind of chit chatting. It was a little bit more effortless, I guess. So that was interesting, I thought.
Can cut through his pretensions a little bit and just get to the heart of the man, is what you're saying?
Yeah, he kind of knew when to change the subject or to I don't know, comment on the commentary, I guess. I think sometimes
Glenn
people just
to his Sally or whatever. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, not in their commentary. So the other commentary, the actor's commentary, was Jessica Paré, who plays Megan, Martin Weiner, who plays Glenn, and Kiernan Shipka, who plays Sally. So they all did a commentary together. It's super awkward. you could tell that like their producers or people like in the room trying to get them to talk because they literally will just start talking because somebody asked them a question. You can tell. So that was a little strange, but you know, there were still a few interesting insights in that.
Could you imagine being just compared, like, this is obviously your big like episode on the show, and she's like, I get to do a commentary, and they're like, yeah, it's with Mr. Weiner, and she's like super excited, and then she walks into the room, and it's two fucking kids,
including the weirdest kid. Yeah.
I do not understand. Where is the winner?
That is not a French accent. That was barely a German accent.
I know.
I didn't know what it was.
I guess I need to do more of the like, where.
Well, hey, look, Will Ashton, we gotta bring this up. This is the big episode where Don gets engaged to Megan, and you kind of let it slip to me and Mike not too long ago that you were actually spoiled on this.
Well, it's one of the things Yeah, I mean, by being in the osmosis of Mad Men being a thing for the last like 10 or so years, I knew that Don got remarried, and I had, I guess, seen a picture of him and with Megan or something along those lines. So whenever Megan was introduced, like I didn't put two and two together, but I just knew that Megan was going to be a big factor of the show. I knew like when she was introduced that was going to be the thing. And I feel like it didn't deter from my viewing experience. Like I think they play, you know, as you're watching it in the later episodes, a pretty heavy hand as far as like, this is going to be an important character. You know, you obviously have the scene where Megan's comforting Sally. You have that scene where she gives Don the Beals tickets, and he like looks at her kind of suggestively and all those things. Like, I think it was pretty evident that, you know, something was going to happen between them. Now, did I expect them to get, you know, married unless I had known that ahead of time? Probably not. But at the same time, you know, I don't think it was supposed to be a secret that these two had flirty eyes for one another.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So you had an idea that they might like be in a relationship, but you didn't realize they were going to get married. We should say they don't get married in this episode. You don't know for sure yet if they're going to get married, but just that they're engaged.
I mean, I think if anything, the fifth season is going to show what happens when you get out of the Disneyland, you know, romanticized fairy tale, idealized version of this relationship and kind of get into nitty gritty. And I think that probably has to do with the fact that we really don't know a whole lot about Megan as a person. Like, we only kind of gradually learned some things in this episode. And I feel like that's to kind of mirror Dawn's perspective, you know, like we have this sort of like romantic, whimsical sort of relationship found between them. But, you know, real life is going to catch up sooner or later. And I think it's less that Dawn is attracted to Megan, more the idea that like she's a fresh start and all this stuff. And I think the episode makes that pretty clear as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting no matter what happens. But it is, you know, for as much flack as Dawn has given Roger for marrying, you know, his secretary, it's kind of evident that, you know, he's kind of following in Roger's footsteps here.
Yeah, Roger is wont to point it out twice in that scene. Now, Mike Overholt's moment of truth, I have to compare you to two people. Are you reacting to, like, when you watch this for the first time, of course, when this happened and it was Megan, were you more sort of like Sally, where you're kind of like, oh, then Megan doesn't get to go? You love Megan, right? Or were you a little bit more like Peggy, where you're just like, you know, a little bit more like, excuse me, I don't need a new mom?
I would say that if the framing is the first time I watched it, I'm Sally, baby. I'm doing crimes across the country. I'm so excited.
She's Maria Von Trapp.
The first time I watched this, I would have like placed Megan, I think, as like my second favorite of the Dawn partners up to this point. I just like thought she was one? Like who do you think? Menken, dude.
Menken, yeah.
Rachel Menken will always be the number one for Dawn.
The one who got away.
But like, I think ever from the like, not like the not committed makeout, the non-committed hookup, when I first watched the show, I was like, that's all Dawn needs, you know? Someone low key, someone no pressure, who isn't like, can be with, like, in the workspace and be a part of that life, but not like make him feel tied down. And she is so great with the kids, and she's fun. She's easygoing. Also, I just, gap tooth, like brethren. I gotta support another person with a gap tooth.
Hey, she's sensitive about that, Mike.
In the commentary too, Weiner has this kind of weird exchange where he's talking about how, we're not trying to be cruel, but like the teeth thing and Sally's lisp, and he mentions that like Lane is kind of just small, like this stuff. He's like, we're not trying to bully these people. We're just using them because it's they're who they are and all this. And you could kind of almost tell that Jonathan Nicholas a little bit like, damn, dude, chill. What other flaws do you want to just like throw out there?
Everything is fair game in advertising is what I think Matthew Weiner is trying to say, but may not be communicating.
This is honestly one of the commentaries where I've disagreed with Weiner the most on certain things. There's this whole thing, especially about Peggy, where he tries to say that she like has like romantic stuff for Dawn and that's playing and all this. I'm like, what? No, like that's not, Peggy does not feel anything like that for Dawn. But he kept talking about it and I'm just like, what? Like, it's your show. Like in the show, you have been very clear about this. It was very strange. But
I mean,
oh well, I mean, I don't know.
This season's kind of laid out that there are like two versions of like a female Dawn in the show. It's like Faye and Peggy. But I feel like, if anything, it seems like his relationship with Faye suggests that he's not attracted to someone who is like him. And if anything, like being too much like him kind of scares him away because that suggests some sort of internal reflection and, like self-evaluation that he is not willing or doesn't want to pursue. So the idea of him having any sort of longing or relationship with Peggy seems kind of dumbfounding. I have to agree with you.
Speaking of Faye, I can't run away from the irony that, not the irony, but I guess maybe it's fitting that Dawn and Faye's relationship, rest in peace, started basically with her being on the phone, breaking up with her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends with Dawn breaking up with her on the phone.
Yeah.
And Faye deserves better. Let's just say it.
I agree. I mean, I felt bad for Faye, because I think this episode plays you like a fiddle pretty well because, like, even though, you're kind of bewildered by Dawn's decision to get engaged to Megan so quickly and so spontaneously.
Bewildered? You saw the milkshake, Will.
Sure.
You saw it.
But, well, yeah, I guess so. The milkshake is is that before or after they get engaged? That is before, right?
Before.
No, it's after.
No, it's before. No. You guys. The milkshake thing lives rent-free in my head for the last decade.
It brings all the boys to the yard, I guess.
That too. No, sorry. Literally the sequence of events is that they're at the diner or whatever and they're eating. And then the milkshake thing happens. And Weiner talks about how they use that to show like, this is this family, this blended family. This is what they look like and feel like. And then the milkshake thing happens that you cut next to Dawn, just like sort of sitting on a bed, like looking pensively. Like I imagine, I joke about this all the time where he's just like, it's just a milkshake. Like he's like losing his mind over this whole thing that she said. And then the very next scene is him proposing to her. That's what seals the deal.
Mm-hmm.
In my head, it's like
just
the
a
morning
milkshake
after, or like that morning. But yeah, I guess you're right.
No, it is after, yeah. But for some reason, I had a similar mindset to Mike.
The milkshake threw you off. But remember, guys, it is just a milkshake.
Dawn, it is just a milkshake. Do not get so sad.
I drink your milkshake. I take my straw and I take it all the way over here and I drink it. I drink it up.
That's how Betty would have reacted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so some bad stuff happening with Betty in this episode. Her and Henry not doing super well.
No.
She even seems to kind of like try to come on to Dawn at the very end there. And then also some Joan stuff. But that's pretty interesting. What do you guys want to talk about first? Joan or Betty?
Well, I do have a third thing, and I'm curious
when you
guys want to discuss it. I don't even know if you guys remember this, but back in January, I got a message from a friend and fan of the show, Caleb Green. Do you guys remember this? I've been saving it for a while. Okay, I sent it to you guys, but I think you guys ignored it, and I didn't read it. And I didn't read it because I didn't want it to be spoiled. But now that we're at the end of season 4, I have it pulled up here. Do you want me to read that now or wait until later in the episode?
It wouldn't feel right if you read it, Will, but if Santa read it, that would be more fitting for this season.
Okay, I can see if Santa's here. Santa! Oh, Santa! I think it might be Beetlejuice roles where you have to say Santa 3 times for him to come.
Yeah. Well, don't say Beetlejuice again. Oh, shoot.
Oh, no. Oh, well, I mean, you know Beetlejuice better than I do, John.
Hey, come on. Not 3 times.
All right, maybe let's see if I say Santa 3 times.
Well, that is 3 times.
Oh, Jonathan, you wanted to see
Santa,
me. Oh, and Mike. How are we doing? I see I've got a letter here.
Yeah, can you protect us from Beetlejuice?
I'll try my best. But you know that Beetlejuice is a demon, and I am not.
He's got me there, bub. Why would you even say that?
I cannot deal with forces outside of the living. I can only control those with a pulse. John knows this, but chooses to ignore it.
Is this guy going to read the freaking letter or what?
I
got to wait and get you.
I'm going to read it now. Gosh darn it. All right, so this is what Caleb had to say. I think season 4 is a mystery novel, but the mystery is, who is Dawn's second wife? We're given a lot of plausible culprits throughout the season. Dr. Faye, Allison, the assistant who quits, Stephanie, Anna's niece, but really it's background character, somewhat like a maid in a Christie novel, who was there the whole time if you were paying attention, in Megan. Megan is there in most of the scene in the background, just being quietly placed in more prominent role intentionally. I think Bear's casting is also part of it because even though she is in the background, she is maybe one of the most striking people ever on film. I have trouble believing Jessica Parr has ever blended into a crowd in her life. And that was the writer here, Caleb, who's putting emphasis on this, I should say. Anyway, it's like a fun misdirection thing that after you know what happens, it's fun to trace how they get there. All right. I guess that's all for me. I'm heading out. Bye, everybody. Bye, Santa.
Bye, Santa.
Bye. See you in December.
I gotta say, since this is my second time watching through the season, I gotta kind of agree with what he was saying as far as it's really fun knowing who Megan is and the role she's going to play in Dawn's life, rewatching this season.
For the record, by the way, I do remember this. I do remember reading this and being like, oh yeah, Will can't read this, obviously.
I mean,
but you agree then?
Time hearing it.
Yeah.
I can't say it was my first time reading it because I didn't read it. Santa read it. But that was my first time hearing it, yes.
You said you read the letter before you gave it to Santa, though.
I never read it. I just read it now.
You were reading it for the first time. Oh, you heard Santa read it for the first time. I understand.
That's correct. Yes, yeah.
Got it. All right. Well, okay. Megan. And we agree that we like Megan. Will, did you say that you liked Megan too?
I do like Megan. I just want to thank Caleb for writing in and saying that, by the way. Yeah.
This was back in January. My gosh.
Yeah, sorry. I did miss this one. I was trying to organize an anniversary of one of my favorite events that happened previously in January, early on, around, 4 years ago. So yeah, I was busy. But yeah, thank you to Caleb. Excited to hear what you think, what type of media season 5 relates to.
But I do agree. I mean, I think he gets to what I was saying there, which is that I think the show does kind of plant the seeds pretty prominently throughout the season in the way that even if you, like I said, know what's going to happen, it's fun to kind of see oh, okay, she's swimming in the background. You just kind of see her prominently coming forward. And I do think we've talked about this before. I think this season, in terms of its cinematic style, is having a lot more fun with background gags and doing things that are not just characters iterating kind of funny quips. They're doing more visual gags and playing with their style more in a way that seems really fun, I think.
Yeah, Harry gets some slapstick a little bit in this, where he's kind of hitting on the Carolyn, whatever, the Morticia named person, where he's just like, hey, how's it going? And it's like a very, very 60s movie. But then also that he has that thing with Ken where he's like, and we're going to be able to, and we're picking up the pieces or whatever. And Ken's like, I just told you that. And I'm, of course, obviously laughing, hooting and hollering, slapping my knees and being like classic Ken Cosgrove. Yeah.
But no,
By the way,
funniest bit, though, is Peggy saying she won't be there, and Harry just walks away. He doesn't even say anything.
No, thank you. Yes. Well, that was another thing I disagreed with Weiner on, where Weiner was just like, I think Harry, he just kind of like likes being around this girl. It's not that he wants to sleep with her. And I'm like, wait, what? Did you write this? You wrote this, right? Like, of course Harry wants to sleep with her. Like, what? It was like stuff like that where I'm just like, I didn't understand.
I mean, some writers have that sort of weird distance thing where they like don't really like they put it out on the page and don't really like think as internally about it. It's a weird thing. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think that's my question for like Glenn. Like, was Glenn always going to be the biggest creeper in the world, or did it like just become that way because of the show? Did Matthew not realize he was just writing his real life son onto the piece of paper? Like, was he writing himself on the piece of paper?
He was trying to say in this episode, like when Glenn is going up to like be creepy with Sally as usual, he's just like, he's not creepy at all. Like he's obviously reacting to like everybody saying he's creepy. He's like, he's not creepy. He's just a kid, who goes to school and wants to say goodbye to his friend. And we're all just like, dude, what? Like, wait, listen to the words coming out of this kid's mouth. Like even when he's just like being like, get me something, he just sounds so creepy. Like all of it's creepy.
He reminds me. Okay. He reminds me of, in Family Guy, there's like the news anchor that has like the son with the upside down face, and he keeps trying to like act like his son is normal, but like everyone's like freaked out by him. I feel like that's what Matthew Weiner's son's like. He's like, my son is normal, damn it.
That's perfect, actually. Speaking of the Betty stuff, she fires Carla. And this was another thing where in the commentary, they were saying, Weiner was saying, like, I agree with Betty. Like, maybe she didn't do this in the right way, but she shouldn't, she was entitled to fire Carla and all this stuff. And I'm just like, what? And also that, like, oh, she's right to be like, oh, don't let those kids say goodbye to each other. And it's like, it's so awful. Like, it's so awful. I mean, firing her, she's been with them for years.
Yeah.
Years.
I really feel for Carla in this. I mean, and you can tell like she knows it's coming because like I love that Weiner has enough sense, at least as a director, to like focus the camera on her reaction when Betty's getting ready to fire her because she like has probably been through this route before and it's just like, oh god, like
her body language,
right? Yeah, it's really good acting on that actress's part as well. I think.
Glad we agree. I was nervous. People would be like, no, John. Betty was right to fire Carla. She needs someone closer to the house.
Is this safe to say? Is this the last time we see her?
Should we tell him, Mike?
I mean, it seems like it's fair game. You can tell me when it is the last time, but if she comes back, then
we haven't always. There have been times where we've left it purposely ambiguous.
Okay, I'll say it. Just wait until the mystery of the third wife.
I'll say. That'd be a great last season reveal. Is Freud just somewhere, just like rolling in his grave, and
I was right. But yeah, no. So she fires Carla, and one of my favorite things about this episode, Weiner does talk about how this episode's about mortality. It's about the future. It's literally called Tomorrowland, not just the Disneyland component of that, but obviously also the Brad Bird movie. But
I was going to ask Mike where he stands on Tomorrowland, the movie.
Loved it.
Loved it. I like Tomorrowland. Are you being ironic or are you sincere?
No, I'm embellishing a little bit. I remember liking it when I saw it in theaters. I liked it.
Me too.
Surprised it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it is an absolutely messy script, but it's a film I love very much. Actually, I don't love it that much. I like it. But I think it doesn't get its full due. And it seems like based on John's facial reactions that he is confused as to why we're saying positive things about
that movie is hot garbage. What are you guys talking about? What? Are you talking about the same movie?
I was going to say, because this was before, that movie came out before Cinemaholic, so I don't know if we've actually really talked about it.
Remember we talked about it in Now Conspiring. It is a possibility that I did see it with Mike.
Oh, wow.
I was actually just going to bring that up. I'm pretty sure we did. Because I know for a fact I saw that Mercado.
Yeah, so I think we did. That was like George Clooney, Britt Robertson, Hugh Laurie. No thanks. Nope. Bad movie, according to me. My opinion.
I have a very specific memory of our screening, like the speakers being just really hot. I just remember that movie being loud in theaters.
I remember at the press screening, I went to a kid threw up before the movie and had to leave.
He's like, who's in this? The guy from The Men Who Stare at Goats?
Wait, who's in this? That lady from the first time? Was this twee Sundance film, the movie? Yeah, sorry.
Well, I think we were... oh, yes. So the thing I like about this episode a lot is how you do have this whole thing. Like, Don has that line to Megan about, like, do you know the things that had to happen for us to get to know each other? And it's kind of talking about like fate, and it's almost like a meta commentary on how TV shows work, of how things kind of cause other things to happen. And what's so wild to me is the irony that, you know, at the ending scene where Betty is kind of like, like she kind of wants to reconnect with Don, it seems like, which another thing that Weiner is just being like, oh, it's not that she wants to like rekindle things with Don. It's like, that's the scene you wrote. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course she is. That's what she's doing. Anyway. All of that happened because she fired Carla, because she had this reaction, and all of that happened because of Glenn and Sally, and all of that happened because Betty like caught them doing whatever and decided that she wanted to like split them up. All these things to kind of create this like perfect little world for herself. The end result is that Don gets engaged to Megan. And it's like this weird series of events where like Don doesn't even realize or even seems to process that this is the only reason this is happening is because Glenn and Sally became friends in that Christmas episode at the beginning of the season. And it's just kind of like, I just think it's such a cool thing to put into the show, because on the one hand, you have the whole subplot with Peggy, who, you know, similarly, like an opportunity kind of just falls into her office. She wasn't looking for it, but Joyce comes in with that model, and then Peggy sees an opportunity and she takes the initiative. She gets their, you know, the first business for Sterling Cooper Draper Pryce in what is it, like 10 weeks or whatever. And then in a weird similar way, Don just kind of like happens to end up engaged. Like it's just, but he does kind of take the initiative to like, you know, I guess seduce her or whatever.
I'm thinking of that meme, you know, with the dominoes where it's like the little piece with the guy bent down and the big one. I'm imagining the little piece being Betty agrees to babysit her weird friends or her friend's weird kid. And then the big piece is Dawn gets engaged to a secretary at Disneyland.
That's kind of perfect, actually. Matt, Will, you should create that meme and then post it on the Mad Men subreddit. That'd be pretty good.
We have a subreddit? Oh, you mean
I
see.
Mad Men. Yeah,
have you heard
not
of
for
the
us.
popular
No.
the AMC show Mad Men? There's lots of followers and listeners.
All right.
Own subreddit.
I will do that if I remember.
I also I had this thought at the end of this episode. Like, I mean, obviously it's my name. It's one of my favorite lines is when Henry tells Betty that no one's ever on her side. And it's so true to the point that Betty's not even on her own side. Like, she is the undoing of everything that she ever actually even wants. So,
right.
And on top of that, you know, I think we're talking kind of about like being like two-faced and, you know, maybe hypocritical or not remembering your past or your past catching up on you. Can I read you something similar to? I mean, Will read something earlier.
I didn't read anything. Santa did.
Santa did. I'm skipping through some words, but this is a review from Tomorrowland. It's very imperfect, and the ending is truly atrocious. But the good in Tomorrowland far outweighs the bad. The film's only grace is its superb writing. Blah 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 blah. Grade B+.
I was wrong. I remember, because I do remember being kind to the film. This was what, 2015?
Well, that was at the height of Pixar theory, right? Like you.
Oh yeah. This is like from the John Negroni website that has the ball as the O.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, but I mean the review was like 2015, right? That would have been like a year after.
2 years after.
2 years, okay.
2 years. But I remember rewatching, because I remember having that like initial positive reaction to it, but still hating the ending. But I remember rewatching it like 3 years later. It was whenever it was right before Brad Bird did not a Mission Impossible movie, it was something else. But I rewatched it and I was like, what was I thinking?
2?
Oh yeah, maybe it was Incredibles 2.
It would have to be.
And I remember just being like, because it was, yeah, it was 2018. But I remember watching it and I was like, this sucks. Like I was genuinely like upset with myself.
You admit it in the review. You say, perhaps I'm being too easy on it due to my fondness for Brad Bird.
I will say I've only seen it once, so if you've seen it twice, then I'll cut you some slack, John.
I wish I'd only watched it once.
I'm sorry. For
now you're pushing it, John. Now you're pushing it.
It was too good not to share.
Joan is keeping her baby. Will, were you surprised by this, or did you see it coming?
I don't know if I saw it coming. Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm surprised by it. I mean, I don't know. I guess I was so focused on the Dawn and Betty and Peggy stuff that I kind of just put Joan as an afterthought in this episode. I think she has some great moments, to be clear, and I love her getting like a sort of weird like backhanded promotion thing where it's like she's promoted in title only, and it's like, to be clear, there's no pay, upgrade with this or whatever Lee says, or sorry, Lane. Jeez Louise. But yeah, I mean, I think her and Peggy venting their frustrations is a beautiful moment. And I love that they both can just unwind and just be like, men suck so bad. But no, I mean, I guess I'm not that surprised in the sense of like thinking it over. I think it makes sense for her. I'm a little surprised and not surprised that her husband isn't doing the math and being like, wait a minute. But maybe that's coming in season 5. I don't know.
Well, there's a fan theory about that popped up when this episode came out and people were rewatching the season. So the fan theory, and people still hold to it today, is that if you rewatch that episode, Hands and Knees, and she goes to like the abortion office and stuff, there's a scene where she's at the bus stop and she's like looking out the window and stuff. And so there's a theory that she takes the bus and instead of going back home, she goes to visit him in basic training in order to be able to sleep with him again and try to like basically make it look like that's what gets her pregnant. It's not ever mentioned in the commentaries. I think that Occam's razor says like, no, it's just that she probably, he probably just didn't do the math. He's not a doctor. He's probably just blissfully ignorant of it. Who knows? But hey, yeah, season 5, we'll see.
He is kind of a doctor, right?
Yeah, I said he's a doctor. Or did I say he's not?
I think he said not.
He said he's not a doctor, but I thought you were being...
Oh, yeah, what I meant to say. Yeah, he's a doctor. So, like, yeah, he knows this stuff, at least to some degree, right? So...
I choose to think that he is unaware, and I think it's just another layer of him just, like, being a bad doctor.
Yeah, I like that too, actually. There are no brains in his fingers, and in that sense, too, I guess. But also, because you mentioned that scene with, I love also that scene with Peggy and Joan. I think we all do. But in the commentaries, Weiner says that like the actors loved doing it, Christina Hendricks and Elizabeth Moss, because this was kind of the culmination of their, whole relationship for the past 4 seasons of how they've been kind of at odds a lot. They've been competing together, and here you finally get this moment where they just seem to enjoy being around each other. And apparently the actors just love doing it. And apparently Elizabeth Moss also got a lot of satisfaction with that bullshit line. That's bullshit. Like apparently that's like really her like genuinely laughing it up, yucking it up with Christina. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point too. Is just, it's so refreshing, especially after so much tension built between them, to see them actually being friendly and cordial and having fun in each other's company. I think that's great too.
Yeah. They're not best friends, but they are coworkers. Speaking of coworkers too, there's a lot of stuff you'll notice in this episode of like the effects of the layoffs. You can really feel it. The office is quieter. They purposely made that the case where you hear fewer phones ringing, you hear fewer clacking of the keys. And I just love that those extra touches because the office does feel different. And that's a real thing. Maybe Mike, maybe you've been in that situation where like the office will just be kind of eerie because it's like a couple people. Well, we know that the movie theater that you work at is constantly hustling, bustling. You had a sold out screening tonight. You can't relate to this at all.
Yeah. I thought you were going to tee this up with a reference to the Australian Office that's apparently coming out pretty soon. Like, The Office feels eerie. The Office feels different. The Office is Australian now. You know, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's too deep of a cut, but I respect it. Yeah.
Well, shit. Fine. Leave me out to dry then.
Yeah. There's this whole other thing where so Weiner and Iglo are talking about this, and I think it's Iglo who mentions it, and Weiner tees him up, and they're talking about like there are two directions that Don seems to be like weighing, and I'm curious what you guys think of this. It's measured by like Faye and Megan. So like Megan represents the obvious thing, right? Tomorrowland, you know, this chance to reinvent yourself, the future. So this next phase, this new chapter. So do you kind of just like keep looking to the future, reinvent yourself and move forward? That's a very Dawn thing. Or do you do what Faye is kind of suggesting in that first scene where she's talking about like, also you do need to better understand the past. That's the whole point of therapy. She is like, you know, like a psychiatrist person, right? So her thing is like, okay, before you can look to the future, you need to know thyself. You need to understand the past. You need to figure out who you are, accept these problems and limitations, and then you can move forward. So it's like this tension of like these two different paths, and then Dawn picks the Megan side of it. And I'm curious what you guys think of that, because it's not like the Megan side of it is wholly bad or anything, but do you think there's something to like, is that really like what the show in a sense is kind of about, that like, this is why Don is the way that he is. He keeps doing this.
Yeah, I think it shows that like Dawn has a choice, right? Especially I think the scene in Anna's home is important. Like there's this moment, right, where the kids are there, they ask who Dick is, he gets to tell them, and then it's just like you think this growing moment for Dawn and his kids. And then what happens immediately, like it is underscored by the fact that he's given her a ring. And as soon as Chekhov's ring comes into play here, you kind of know what's happening in the episode. And like, that's the choice he has, right? You know, am I going to be Dick or am I going to be Dawn? And he just continues the Dawn cycle.
I think when I first saw the episode, I thought he was going to be tempted by Megan, but then ultimately he was going to come back and propose to Faye. And that was going to be this big kind of whirlwind thing. And I was a fool. That is just absolutely not what happened. I overestimated our boy.
I mean, I do think there is something fascinating about how in the past, like the last 3 seasons, California is where Dawn has traditionally been emboldened to be Dick. And so, like you said, Mike, where it's like he has this moment where he's with his kids and he's back at Anna's house, and, you know, it's like, okay, he can finally maybe let the guard down a little bit. And he just gets scared. And then in this episode, he does some of the most Dawn things we've ever seen him do. And it feels like a true regression in some respects. But at the same time, I do feel this weird sort of tinge of happiness seeing Dawn get his shit together and be like, all right, Dawn's going to be married again. The company's coming together again, even though it's mostly happening behind his back because of Peggy. But still, things are looking up for him. And it's this weird, I think, push and pull that the show thrives on, where it's like, okay, you know, like Dawn is clearly regressing as a person, and even the places where he seems to have liberated himself, he feels this need to confine himself to his personality. But at the same time, Dawn be winning, and so I'm happy for the guy.
Yeah, listen, and that's the thing that's great about this show. It's like, you know, I can sit here analytically and think about that, but then I'll tell you a bigger piece of me, the worst part of me is like, listen, Dawn's hot, Megan's hot. Hot people should be hot together, and I'm happy for them.
Those symmetrical faces are looking at each other, and baby, the fireworks are coming, you know.
But seriously, Tan, California Dawn, he's hot in this episode. You know, I think hotter than New York Dawn. And do you think we just want to highlight again? I mean, it's another moment of California Dawn. Dawn goes to California, and things happen.
Yeah, you get to do a cannonball in the pool.
Yeah, or when he falls on the bed like such a dad. I love that moment so much. And they do the makeup. He looks a little bit sunburnt / tan. It's very there.
He also misses what seems to be a pretty important World Series game, if I'm not mistaken.
1965.
I was gonna ask Mike about this. So he's trying to go to a game for the Dodgers, right? and it seems like it's a relatively important one, but I don't know the historical context. I know Matt Zoller talks about it a little bit, but I was still kind of fuzzy. Do you know anything about this game, Mike?
I don't know. I mean, I know that series is the Dodgers and the Twins. I know it goes to 7 games. Honestly, wasn't paying that close of attention to it. It might have been the 7th game, which would be like the deciding one, which is pretty fun. But outside of like
baseball was mentioned, and you okay, Mike?
Listen, that's how hot Don was in this episode. I was just like, wow.
I mean, we talked about it before. Like the cast has mentioned, like when Don, like when they act with John Hamm, he was so hot that they'd forget his lines. Mike is having a similar experience. Like he looks at John Hamm's face and he's like, "Baseball? What is that? The game with the sticks?"
I do want to read this excerpt from Keith Phillips' review of the episode back in 2010 on the AV Club. He wrote, "The fact that I never know where Mad Men is going is part of why I love the show, but it's not that I love the unpredictability of it, if only because the word unpredictability implies a much wilder ride than we usually get. It's that these characters, so intimately realized in every detail, never seem like they're being pulled along by anything so mundane as plot mechanics. There always seems to be bigger forces at work." I think for me, and I'm curious what you guys think, I think this really crystallizes one of the main appeals of the show to me beyond, like, because when you get suckered into the show, it's like, it's the 60s, and it's like, oh my God, they're sexist. How could people be like that? Whatever. But over time, what really brings you into the show's like wavelength and makes it lasting, I think, is that, you know, intimate detail for the characters here, and how it just feels like these characters are written more by real life and the writers. And I think that's a very special thing. I don't think it's something that Weiner has managed to pull off since this show. And it just feels like a miracle in some senses. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think, because I read that piece a couple hours before we recorded, and I know he also mentions that, like, one of the secret sauces about Mad Men is, like, it's not just that it's unpredictable, but, like, it feels true to the characters, and every decision, even if you're thrown off by it, like, feels like something that would happen because, like you said, they're so well written and so well realized. And I feel like a lot of shows that followed the example of prestige TV were so caught up in the unpredictability and the style of it that they didn't really always capture that idea of, like, still staying true to the characters, but finding inventive and fun and unique ways to flip the script or challenge cliches or what have you. And I think that's where Mad Men has really excelled. And I think that's also where Breaking Bad also excelled.
I was about to mention Breaking Bad and The Sopranos. I mean, it's a trifecta of these 3 shows where I think that they just, but hey, you know what? I would give props to maybe a show that doesn't quite hit that mark as well, but gets pretty close a lot, would be Succession. I know, Will, you just recently finished it, but
yeah, I mean,
I'll go out on a limb. I'll say I think it gets pretty close.
I mean, I was going to be coy about this because I haven't actually watched this show, so I'm not trying to speak ill of it, but I've heard, as a point of comparison, that, like, Ozark is kind of like a type of show that falls in the opposite direction, where it's like it gets so caught up in trying to be unpredictable and stylistic that it doesn't always feel believable, and it hurts itself because it tries to go for those heights and falls short. But I haven't seen the show, so I can't properly talk about it.
Have either of you seen John Hamm's DQ video of, like, breaking down iconic characters?
No.
Obviously, he knows Don Draper, and something he says in the beginning of the video, and it really struck me, was like that Mad Men really was like the last show, like the last important show before all the important shows. He talked about how, like, they took up this mantle that, like, The Sopranos and, like, The Wire had left, where it's like there was, like, one show that was kind of dominating this type of, like, TV, and then it was Breaking Bad, and then it was all the shows and all the streaming services. And he's talking
Game of Thrones.
Oh, he talked about, he says Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, you know, all the shows that come after. And he says that he felt very lucky because they hit this point in time where they didn't have to compete with all the attention on all these other shows and all these other networks. And I think that does play into it, where TV, and I think it ends with Mad Men and, like, capers into Breaking Bad. It's like, they're like, we went from, like, prestige TV, where, like, TV mattered. Like, there are people who focus their whole lives on TV, like, producing it, writing it, and, like, caring about the production of it, to it like the streaming wars and it becoming more about content and like the unpredictability and how many tweets can you get about your show because something crazy happened and you rush it and there's tons of times between production because all your stars are now going off and doing movies. And I just that really, I never thought about it in that lens, but it is true. And I do think it's one of the things that makes Mad Men work so well is that they didn't have to worry about that. They were focused on, it just being the best thing that Mad Men could be. And all the actors were, I mean, Brian Batt talked about it. He wished he could have talked. He was a special show. He wished he could have stayed on for forever because they all kind of knew they were cooking with fire there. And I just don't get that sense from modern shows as much, even like Succession. I think Succession is a fine show. I also think it suffers a little bit from like consumer hive mind. Like I've rarely met, I feel like someone who has differing opinions on Succession. I feel like there's like one way to think about that show in the masses, but I digress.
I would take The Bear over Succession for that mental myself.
True.
I mean,
it's definitely more popular. Yeah.
It sounds like the way you're talking about that, like something like Euphoria is kind of thing, like that vibe that you're talking about, Mike, where it's like that show got so caught up in being about like the twists and the turns and the shocking things. And then also the cast got so big that like now we don't even know if we're going to get like a third season of that show because everyone's just doing their own thing and all that stuff. And that kind of just seems to be like what TV's like in a nutshell in some ways right now.
To be fair, I think the reason we're not getting a third season of that show is because it's the biggest hack in the industry trying to run that show.
Yeah. And look, it's a really interesting line of discussion. And, I was literally just talking about it on Cinemaholics today, just specifically with like that Game of Thrones spinoff. Like it's only going to be 6 episodes and it's like the budgets are getting slashed and like this stuff just isn't sustainable, and it does make me think that like a show like Mad Men, one of the things that really made it work was like, yeah, they had budget concerns and all this, but the format, like you're saying, it was so fine tuned by 2007 and up to this point in 2010 when this season came out that it was down to a science of like, this is how you prop these shows up to be successful creatively and in a way that brings attention. And it was the weekly release schedule, the way the marketing works. It's a new season every year, roughly about 13 episodes. But then, yeah, we're now in a situation where we're getting like 6 to 8 episodes a season, maybe. And then every couple of years, a lot of them are like super famous movie actors too. So there's like a lot of cross-pollination that doesn't always work. And it has to be like, you have to binge the whole thing. You have to watch all of it. And everything's based on algorithm stuff instead of, people being able to like have conversations about it and like insightful commentary on it, a podcast about it, in fact. So yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
And also it comes down to if the streamer or network that is releasing that show even promotes it and lets people know that they can watch it.
Exactly. Yeah. There's like 2 things that came out this week right on a streamer. There's Agatha All Along and The Penguin, which I hear The Penguin is fantastic, but I don't know if I have time to watch it.
I mean, I was just thinking about, and I really truly am not, I know you guys like Apple TV and this is not honestly me trying to disparage it. It's just the example that comes to mind. They were talking about how like the Time Bandit show got canceled and it's like, yeah, nobody watched it. And it was like,
yeah, I honestly didn't. Pretty bad though.
Was it? I just honestly didn't even know that premiered yet. I was like, oh, I thought that's coming out like later in the fall, but I guess the whole season's been out. And so like, it was just like, they didn't promote that at all from what I can tell. Like, I didn't know that was even available yet. So no wonder no one watched it.
It was a stinker.
A show I'd never heard of until like this award season was Hacks. Neither Hannah or I had even seen Hacks.
I'd heard of it.
I heard about on HBO. Yeah. Like, and maybe I did. It didn't stay with me, but like even like again, like on HBO, you go on, like even now after winning awards, I was trying to like think. I was like, oh, I saw this show like won awards. I never didn't know what it was, and like I couldn't even really find it on HBO. But anyways.
Well, hey, speaking of the Emmys, though, I do got a shout out. I think I've mentioned before, but Shogun, one of the best. Like, it's better Game of Thrones. Like, best way to put it. 100%.
I mean, and this is the last thing because I don't want to divulge too far into this, but I feel like the irony is that Netflix is much better about promoting shows that aren't theirs. Like, for instance, it seems like a lot of people are watching Your Honor right now, which was on, I think, Showtime or something. got canceled after 2 seasons because no one really watched it, and now people are discovering it on Netflix and be like, "Oh, this is awesome. Let's watch this." And it's
Mike
like,
is one of those people.
"Oh, are you, Mike?" I haven't watched it. But...
I'm an original. I watched that on Showtime.
Okay.
I am someone who has always had a Showtime subscription because he loved Dexter, and I will rewatch Dexter all the time. And so one day I'm on Showtime. Well, what's this? Brian, my guy? I was going to say Bryan Cranston.
It is Bryan Cranston.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm blanking on it. But yeah, Bryan Cranston. And I was like, yeah, I'll watch it. It's great. Good show. Glad everyone's joined. I feel like we're super far away from Mad Men now, though.
We are. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to get into? I didn't have too much left, and yeah, we are coming up on time. But I'll just say overall, this is why I really like this season. It's such a tight season. I think Caleb kind of touched on it too. It's got a really cool arc to it, and I agree with the Keith Phillips commentary in the AV Club where he talks about how it's just kind of interesting that like they don't try to do season 3 again where it ends with like we got to save the agency. It's just sort of a little bit more true to life where it's like, well, the agency was in danger, but now it's not. They did a few things. They made a few key moves, and now they're just like incrementally kind of getting out of a hole. And that feels right to me. And this whole thing with like the Megan stuff, like, yeah, it just genuinely comes off as something that this is what we were building to all along. And the whole thing where Faye says at the beginning of the season, like, you'll be married in a year. It just makes you feel like this was all preordained and was really planned, and this was the vision that they had, and that really comes together and in the best way. And this is one of those times where I'm just so excited to just get started with season 5, which I believe is a 2-parter, the next episode.
I mean, I do really enjoy when shows can successfully kind of like throw a grenade and blow up their structure and then like get another season of just like, okay, what are we going to do now, and kind of figure themselves out. I think it's one of the reasons I really enjoyed watching Barry is because like they kind of follow a similar structure where like each season ended with them kind of just like coming up with the most like bombastic kind of way of ending it, but like being smart enough when constructing the next season of being like, okay, now this happened, like realistically, where would these characters move forward? But finding inventive and engaging and thoughtful ways of kind of presenting that. And yeah, I think this season was, a true test of their burgeoning kind of creativity of being like, okay, we've done this sort of thing for 3 seasons. Now we kind of have to like reinvent the wheel a little bit in order to move forward. Like Don, I mean, that's kind of like what happened with him. Like when things kind of get into a corner, he has to kind of reinvent himself and move forward, but also staying true to the idea of like, how much can someone really change and how much can someone really reinvent themselves before, that kind of falls through, or they just kind of end up in a bigger mess than what they were before. And I think it is really telling that this episode counterbalances Dawn's whole thing with Betty, yeah, where like she's also someone who kind of makes these big brass decisions throughout the episode. And anytime she makes something like that, like we said with Carla, or, maybe potentially trying to reignite her relationship with Dawn, she gets punished or chastised for it and has to be told like, you can't reinvent yourself. You can't be that person. And that's kind of, I think a testament to, the times that she's living in, but also just a stark commentary on what this episode talks about, which the idea that men can kind of play and do all these sort of thing. And the women ultimately are kind of forced to pick up the slack and actually do the work. And, we see that also with Peggy as well, and Joan. So yeah, I think that's a really smart way of tackling the season and this finale. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens in season 5.
Yeah, I think my final thoughts here on season 4 is I think the big question that Mad Men has been asking since season 1 is, what is work-life balance and where do you derive your worth from in the midst of it? And the best thing about where we are up to this point, 4 seasons in, is that the show is still just kind of shrugging at you about it. To echo John, you saying like it could have ended like season 3 where it's like, how are we going to save the business? But instead, Peggy kind of does, or like she like makes strides towards, the business being saved and booking the first business in months. And no one really cares. No one really even knows it happened. In fact, I think Don doesn't even realize how big Peggy was in it. He gives like Ken Cosgrove as much of a congratulations. And I just think that's true. Like the question of work-life balance, where you get your worth from, is something everyone struggles with, and there's no right answer because it's different. And I just love that that's the tension the show lives with it. And I also love that we're here at the end of season 4, and I think these characters are all still believable, and they haven't become caricatures of themselves. I think if we went back and watched the first 2 episodes of season 1, I don't think any of us would be like, who the hell is this person and how did we get from here to here? I think it all just tracks and makes sense. And I'm excited for season 5.
Yeah. I also just wanted to say real quick how illuminating but also disappointing it is, like, that Dawn's form of a compliment to Peggy is comparing her to the woman that he just brashly got engaged to.
It reminds me of you,
right,
Dad.
Especially after all of like the shit she had to go through going up in her career, being like, oh, she just got it because she was his secretary,
right? And also just the growth that they had together during the suitcase. It's just it's dispiriting. Yeah,
because it blindsides. Like, she sees them kissing, she's like, wait, what the heck is going on? And she's just like, she doesn't know anything about this man. Now, I will say, Mike, because you mentioned the work-life balance thing in the show shrugging at you, I think you could argue that the show does have its own case for it with that Ken Cosgrove scene, which he's sitting there and they're trying to tell him, like, get this business involved, do this, it'll save the agency or whatever. And he's just like, do whatever you want, but this is my life. Like, that's work. This is life. And it's like, I'm not going to blow up my relationship with Cynthia. And he's kind of putting Pete on blast for it. And I think that this is a great Ken Cosgrove moment. Will, I hope when you watched it, you were like, oh, this is why John and Mike go to bat for Ken the 10. He and Peggy kind of kick some ass together. He treats her as an equal, but we know first season he was a bit of a loser. We agree, but like Mike said, you can kind of see that natural evolution over the course of a couple of years.
All I'll say is this season proposes that more Ken equals more Ray Wise. And I am all for that. So I hope season 5 has more Ray Wise and subsequently more Ken Cosgrove.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if they land the account. Okay, so we'll put all that on the burner for the next season. We'll see what happens next, of course. And, we'll stay away from those memes. They're going to spoil more stuff for you.
Well, can I at least make that meme that you told me to make?
Yeah, that one's okay. But we'll post it. Stay away from the subreddit. It'll only cause some trouble. But we'll get in trouble if we record any longer. So thank you all for listening. And we'll be back soon for season 5. Can't wait. The next episode, again, is a 2-parter called A Little Kiss. Looking forward to it. And funny enough, it's one of the bigger gaps in the show's production because this, like we said, this was 2010 when this came out. The next episode came out March 2012. Very interesting. There was no 2011. So maybe we'll get into that as well. We'll see. But okay. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
I just realized we never asked Santa if Glenn was on the naughty or nice list.
Wait, is Santa here?
I don't know. Is he? Is he?
I figured he was kind of tired.
Santa Claus?
Santa.
Santa Claus.
Santa.
Santa Claus.
Are you here?
Oh, someone call me.
Hey, Santa.
Hello.
We missed you. Will Ashton had a question for you.
Hey, Santa. Hello. Is Glenn on the naughty or nice list? Glenn Powell? That wonderful fella from the Twisters movie?
Yes.
He's always on my naughty list, if you know what I mean. Hubba hub.
Oh, yeah. He cheated on his wife with Sydney Sweeney, according to a TikTok I watched.
I don't follow that celebrity gossip.
You didn't know about that, Santa?
Oh, no. I don't follow that celebrity gossip. I'm Santa. I'm busy making presents and whatnot.
Well, are you making presents for Glenn Bishop?
Who?
He was on Mad Men.
I think you remember that canonically I've only watched one episode of Mad Men.
Well, I guess that answers your question, Will.
I guess so, yeah.
Why do we let him get away with this?